Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here. I'm Jen Bradovich. I'm Director of Exhibitions and Programs at Print Center New York. And thank you for joining me this afternoon or morning for some of us for this conversation, Connecting the Dots, Crow's Shadow Institute of the Arts. This talk is presented in conjunction with our exhibition Storywork, The Prints of Marie Watt from the collections of Jordan D. Schnitzer and his family foundation. Storywork was originally organized by the University Galleries at the University of San Diego, where it was curated by John Murphy, who is now the Philip and Lynn Strauss Curator of Prints and Drawings at the Francis Lehman Loeb Art Center at Vassar College. It is on view in Print Center New York's Jordan Schnitzer Gallery until May 18. Our conversation today is led by Rebecca Dobkins. Rebecca is Professor of Anthropology at Willamette University and Curator of Native American Art at the university's Hallie Ford Museum of Art, where she cares for the collection of Indigenous art and works with contemporary Indigenous artists and communities, particularly in the Pacific Northwest. And she's a huge Crow Shadows fan. In fact, she co-authored the book Crow Shadow Institute of the Arts at 25, which accompanied an exhibition by the same name organized by the Hallie Ford Museum in 2017. For this talk, Rebecca has invited the artists Skye Tafoya, Marwin Begaye, and John Hitchcock, along with Crow Shadow studio director Judith Baumann, for a conversation focused on Crow Shadow as an important nexus for Indigenous printmaking. We are excited to do this program in conjunction with Storywork because Crow Shadow has been an extremely formative place for Marie Watt, who forged deep and lasting relationships there that have been integral to both her professional artistic life and her personal life. We believe more people should know about this place, so I want to thank these artists for helping us learn more about it through their practices today. Before we start, some quick housekeeping. The program has auto-generated captions. Turn them on with the CC button at the bottom of your screen or on the settings menu if you're on mobile. The talk is also being recorded and will be available in about a week. The chat is open. You can contribute to the conversation there. Please say hello. Let us know where you're joining from. And send questions through the Q&A function. We'll take questions at the end as long as we have time. So let's get started. Our speakers can join me on screen. You can turn your cameras on. Hi, thank you for being here. Hi, everybody. Okay, Rebecca, I am gonna just hand it right off to you and let's get started.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jen, and thank you, Robin, and the Print Center New York for suggesting this and inviting all of us to be able to highlight the work and the impact of Crow Shadow Institute of the Arts. I've been around and working with Crow Shadow for over 20 years now and have got to see the impact that it's had on Marie and so many other artists. So it's exciting to bring these folks together. I want to first introduce very briefly our panelists, each of whom we'll hear from. The first is Judith Baumann, who is master printmaker at Crow Shadow, Tamarin trained. Marwin Begaye is an associate professor of printmaking and painting at University of Oklahoma School of Visual Arts. John Hitchcock is also professor of printmaking at University of Wisconsin Art Department, where he also wears other hats in the university. And Skye Tafoya has her BFA from the Institute of American Indian Arts, her MFA from Pacific Northwest College of Art here in Portland, and has been many awards and fellowships and residencies, including one very recently at Crow Shadow. Today, we're going to be talking loosely about three different themes that are really important in the work of each of these artists, but also of Crow Shadow. We're going to be talking about the sightedness of Crow Shadow, the sense of place that's so crucial to the experience there, but also to Indigenous arts. We're going to be talking about collaboration, the collaboration that's inherent in printmaking itself, but that also, again, informs so many Indigenous art practices. And then the third is we're going to be talking about printmaking as central to contemporary Indigenous arts and the role that Crow Shadow plays in supporting that process. So I first want to turn it over to Judy Baumann, who's going to introduce you to Crow Shadow.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am just going to give a brief overview of Crow's Shadow, a little bit of the who, what, why, when, and where. Crow's Shadow is located outside of Pendleton, Oregon, in Eastern Oregon. We are on the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, which is CTUIR, if I say it again. And that's comprised of 3 tribes, the Umatilla, the Cayuse, and the Walla Walla peoples. We are currently located on a Catholic campus on the reservation in a 1930s mission-style schoolhouse at the base of the beautiful Blue Mountains. It's really gorgeous out here. The sign that you see in front of you in the slideshow is the turnoff to St. Andrews Road, and I look at that view every morning when I come up the hill from Pendleton. Crow's Shadow was founded by celebrated artists James Lavador, Walla Walla, and Philip Cash Cash, who's Cayuse and Nez Perce. And both are still active board members. In 1992, Crow's Shadow became an independent 501c3 with the mission of providing a creative conduit for educational, social, and economic opportunities for Native Americans through artistic development. Throughout the 90s, Crow's Shadow primarily focused on community and youth-based workshops in printmaking, photography, and traditional arts. In 1998, we were awarded a grant to renovate the lower level of the building where we still currently reside in. And in 2001, Crow's Shadow began its professional print publishing program under the direction of master printer Frank Jansen. James Lavador is frequently fond of saying Crow's Shadow brings the world to the reservation and the reservation to the world. And I really think that's a beautiful sentiment. And I think about that frequently as I work with artists here. Then that's the outside of our building. So that's kind of the front of the building, and we're located in the lower part of the building. If you can see that window on the bottom there, that's actually my office window, and I'm looking at that right above my screen. So it's kind of on a hill, and we're in the basement. And that's the grant that we received to begin studio renovations. You can go to the next slide. So in 2001, this was a seminal piece of our history. There was a 3-day symposium called Conduit to the Mainstream, in which Native leaders, curators, and artists converged at Crow's Shadow. Participants included Marie Watt, Truman Lowe, Joe Fedderson, Edgar Heap of Birds, James Luna, and Kay Walking Stick. All of the artists that were present eventually went on to have residencies here, in some cases multiple residencies. And like previously stated, Marie Watt really kind of credits Crow's Shadow as being this huge influence in her career, and we often describe her as our poster child for Crow's Shadow. We love Marie so much. And since 2001, Crow's Shadow has worked with over 70 artists, many whom have held multiple residencies. Frank Jansen worked for Crow's Shadow as master printer from 2001 to 2017, and I joined Crow's Shadow as primary collaborative printer in 2017. So this is kind of a more recent look at our studios. We have a beautiful new litho press in the corner there. That's an electric bed. So that's really helped elevate our production. We have a little tiny studio sleep room for the artists while they're here off to the side as well. And a gallery space where also we host traditional arts programming. So on weekends, typically there's some sort of traditional arts programming happening here in our facility. Our residency is invitational and often relies on recommendations by past residents. Artists receive a stipend for the time here, and after publishing costs, they receive 50% of sales from their prints. We primarily sell them online and at print fairs. We frame individual impressions from every edition and series that we hold, and this is kind of our lending library that goes out to institutions across the country and regionally. Here, we're up to, I believe, almost 350 individual framed works represented of our entire archive of the past almost 25 years at this point of publishing work. We average 5 to 6 artists a year for residencies that last 7 days to 2 weeks. During the residency, artists work to get to a yes through the creation and proofing of their print. So we collaborate with the artists, and we try to get to that yes, which allows us to then edition the work after the artist leaves the studio. Right now, from residency to publication date, we're a little bit more than 12 months out from the release of editions by artists. We primarily focus on lithographs, monoprints, and monotypes in the studio, which I think is pretty versatile. We have published some woodcuts in the past. I believe Melanie Yazzie is one of the artists, and Marie Watt, actually, her last residency here in 2017, they were both woodcut editions. Though we require no printmaking experience from residents, it's fairly common that many of the artists that we work with have some understanding of printmaking processes. Here we can see Marwin Begaye, and you can kind of advance through some of these relatively fast. Marwin was the first artist that I worked with in 2018, and this was the result of his 2018 residency. He was just here last year, and we're going to start printing his new editions this month. John Hitchcock was here in 2021. These are the results of some of his creations here. This is editioning John and editioning Emily Arthur. You can go ahead and advance. These are some of his prints that he pulled. He also did a really beautiful stone lithograph that's featured later in the slideshow. You can go ahead and advance. And then this is Skye Tafoya, who was just here this past October. And she created a gorgeous monoprint series and then 3 lithographs that we have yet to print. And they both have, those two, if you go back one slide, have Shinkole elements, and she can speak to these. They're absolutely stunning. And then we have a 5-run lithograph that is also very complicated and beautiful. Upcoming residencies include Chinupa Hanska Luger, who's coming here later in May, Kaila Farrell-Smith, and Rachel Martin in 2025. So I'm really excited about all the artists that I get to work with, and it's a huge privilege for me to be able to work for Crow Shadow and participate in its amazing legacy. And Rebecca, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you, Judy. That was fantastic. We're going to now start talking about the sense of place at Crow Shadow and how important it is that Crow Shadow is on the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Reservation. This is an image nearby Crow Shadow. I believe that's the Umatilla River that John Hitchcock took. And I wanted to start with Marwin. To ask Marwin to speak to how the land, how the place of Crow Shadow itself impacted your experience.
Yat Klassen, Deshi, Nisna Jenny Basichin, Kotomi Dasuche, the Beshajan Dational, Dashi, the Nahaskin Schne. Hello, and thank you for attending this. I went through my my protocol of saying hello through my clans using the Navajo language, and it's through those clans that really connect me to culture and connect me through landscape, and through my identity. And so, kind of speaking to what Rebecca is talking about, is like being in that part of the country, being connected to the land in New Mexico, where I grew up, and then where I currently live is in Oklahoma. 2 very different landscapes that I'm connected to now, and kind of going to Crow Shadow is a totally different landscape for me. And so I was amazed to do the residency, and I felt myself, trying to connect to the land and trying to see what the land was offering, what the land was saying, just kind of listening to the land. And it's through those connections that I have culturally that really give myself an identity, and and along with the land and the songs and the prayers are these stories about the land, the stories about the occupants of the land, like the birds and the flowers, and how we share those spaces. And so I was interested in that when I went to Crow Shadow, and of course I went there having a plan, but when I got there, I totally switched up the plan, because I was so amazed by the landscape, by the colors. There are different colors that each part of the land offers, and so I was, so I just scrapped my whole idea. And so what I started looking at was what I knew, was the flowers, the design elements that the tribe uses, and how do I incorporate those elements into the compositions. And so I think that kind of growing up in a family full of jewelers and weavers, I was kind of listening to that, and so I incorporated for each of my visits. I've been there a couple of times, and so with each of the visits, I took to birds. And I think when I got there, the image that you see now on screen was I walked out in the morning, and a woodpecker visited me, and so I was like, oh, okay, well then there's my answer, and I'm going to do the woodpecker. And so with each of the images, that it was kind of like that, just kind of walking out and kind of listening, and kind of taking my morning walks, and kind of just really listening to the land. And I think the evening time was really beautiful for me, because you kind of sit in this valley, and if you walk up a couple of feet, you're able to see above the rolling hills, and you could see the sunset. So that's what struck me, and that's how I came up with those. And then also kind of going to the cultural center there, and kind of listening to the stories, and listening to and just having conversations with the tribal people, and kind of listening to their stories about the land. That's how I work those into those compositions. And so, from the beginning, it's my connection to the land that is really important. And then the piece that you see on the left hand side is the evening song, and I got that was inspired by the morning walks, and the meadowlark would kind of come and kind of meet me on the road, and just kind of sing, and so you see the background below is the sunset. I think you'll see that. And on the right, you'll see a lot of my sketches. As I travel, I'm always sketching, and mostly in an abstract form, just kind of documenting my thoughts into geometric shapes. And for some people, those geometric shapes that you see within rugs, within basketry, all of those are visual cues for us to help us remember who we are as a people, and they really serve as as markers for us for our identity. And so I'm just kind of abstracting just those elements just a little bit.
Thank you, Marwin. That's fantastic. And I have to say that Meadowlark evening song is an incredibly powerful image. And I know it sold out really fast at Crow Shadow. It also happens to be the state bird of Oregon. So it's an extraordinary work. But I think we can go on to the next slide. We're gonna, I want to turn to John and ask John about his experience at Crow Shadow, which I think centrally included, like some artists, many artists include the impact of Jim Labrador, who's one of the co-founders of Crow Shadow, and is really has such a profound, I think, connection is not even beginning to say the relationship that Jim and his land have with one another. But John, could we hear from you about these issues or these experiences of place?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Rebecca, for the introduction earlier and for this panel as well. I was very excited to be able to travel with Jim to his sacred spaces of the land. You know, it's his, you know, it's his land. Like, that's where he's from. His people are from, and so it was really wonderful. He likes to go out really early in the morning. I think around 5 o'clock. To go and drive. And we hit the Starbucks. We get some Starbucks and we have our coffee. We have to have some strong coffee. And then we start this drive. And he drove me through the valley and through areas around where a lot of the inspiration for his work comes from. And so it was a very powerful moment. And that photograph was us standing there by the area that he was driving me through. And then there's another photograph, this one here, where we're in his studio. And so it's very honored to be able to see his studio space and where he's working as well. And so it was a really beautiful moment for me to have that opportunity to see his part of the world and where his people are from and where his space is. And so a lot of the work that I do revolves around also what, Marwin was saying, that place and how important land is. And I think of the idea of mark and what mark does, and mark in the markification of space and where we're at, and how that creates a sense of mindset for you. And for me, going there was definitely a different space working at, but I still came in with ideas of specific things I wanted to work on, and I had drawings and sketches already pre-made that were in relationship to that. And so it was important to look at land as well as a sense of home. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd also like to kind of add into that. I was really fortunate enough to be able to drive around with Jim too on I think my second to last day. And the landscape was just so enormous. And although my work didn't reflect the landscape of that area, it reflected the one here in Cherokee, North Carolina. It was nice that he actually takes time to show the artists around and share stories about that place. I also went to school with a few people from Umatilla Reservation. So during my time there, I was able to talk with them, and they would give me kind of tours of the place and give me real spooky stories about Crow Shadow in general. And even that whole reservation is just so unique, and a lot of talent comes out of there.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned the spooky stories, Skye, but because I do think in all seriousness, that the reality that Crow Shadow is located on a Catholic mission, the Crow Shadow has a lease. This is a great photo. And I think, John, this is one of your photos. I mean, this is the signage for Crow Shadow right now, this minute. And the mission, that the building that Crow Shadow is in was the mission school that many elders today experienced. And certainly many families have stories that connect back to this space. So I think it's a really important element of the experience at Crow Shadow, and it's one that is, you know, at a transition point, because the future of Crow Shadow includes, you know, a future facility that is elsewhere on the reservation. That's the dream, at least. But this has been a very important part, and what I would like to think of as kind of a reclaiming. But I don't know if any of you want to speak specifically to that before we move on and talk about collaboration. But do any of you want to speak to the fact of Crow Shadow being cited in the mission? Funny story, serious story, I don't know.
I love driving to Crow Shadow, because you have to go through the Indian community, and then to me it's like it's so much home. Like you get a sense of the importance of Crow Shadow when you're not there, right? It's big, and you have all these artists who you admire for so many years just kind of going there, making additions, and just that presence, right? That national presence or the international presence, and especially the presence that they have given us through contemporary art, or like the American art. I think you know, they are one of the institutions that is kind of placing us within the context of contemporary American printmaking. And you go there, and you have to drive through the community, and it's so much like home. You're like, oh, okay, and it sort of grounds you, and I really appreciate that. And like when you're walking downtown in Pendleton, or when you're out and about, everyone knows that you're an artist because you don't fit in. Like they'll just start talking to you, like, oh, you're an artist there, you're doing your residency, and you're like, oh, how did you know? You're like, you look different. And so and they're so friendly that it's such a pleasure to always go back and to be a part of that.
Okay. Thanks, Marwin. And yeah, I mean, this is the whole thing. For those of you who've never been to Crow Shadow or to Pendleton, you need to go, you know, so. Okay, so if we could go to the next slide, I think I'd like to transition now to the theme of collaboration. And this is a image of Judy. I don't know whose work you're working on, but it reminds us of the role between the artist and master printer, and the whole studio, the whole dynamism of the studio. And I thought we'd turn to Skye to talk about you know, your experience of collaboration, both at Crow Shadow, but as a fundamental element of your own art practice.
Yeah. So I guess we can advance. This image is from the Women's Studio Workshop in Rosendale, New York. In 2019, 2020, I was accepted to create an artist book there. And this was one of the first times I had actually collaborated, I guess, with people that aren't from my own community. I think basketry is always a collaboration of kind of like a teacher to a student. You're always learning from someone older than you, and the land is teaching you at the same time. So there's like that kind of collaboration. This one was more so, I knew a little bit about book arts, and I still feel like I'm kind of just, you know, blossoming in book arts. But I designed this this book whenever I decided to come home after grad school, after spending about almost 4 years in Portland, Oregon. And so I had a few people tell me that I should apply to this residency, this grant residency. And so I did, and made this book, and we ended up making 44 copies of it. But one of the collaborations was working with the staff at the Women's Studio Workshop to cohesively put everything together in the time frame that we had, which was about 12 to 14 weeks. And since everything was hand set, hand printed, hand woven. The binding of the book was all handmade paper, so everything was a struggle from like the beginning to the end. And I also found out I was pregnant, so then that put it like this kind of like a guard on like how much my body could interact with that piece of work at the time, just because I was always so tired. So this is Chris Patrone on the left and me and Aaron Zona, and we're kind of just talking about the different ways of which we can put writing into the work, because at first it was just it's supposed to mimic a basket, and so you can fold the walls up and down and then create a basket, create half a basket. And so this is the end product, and I hand set every metal type and letterpress the whole thing and made it into a pamphlet, and it now folds nicely into the book, and then the book can close and then you can open and interact with it. But this was definitely one of my first collaborations with a studio. And then I was invited to Self-Help Graphics in, let's see, 2021 to print with Skye Tafoya. And this is, I think we did a 6-color screen print. And this was one of my first collaborations with a master printer. And kind of being unaware of like what my role is, because I am a printmaker. Like I kind of wanted to go and pull prints too, but that's not the case. So figuring out how to make all the screens with and alongside him and the assistant. So yeah, it was a really unique experience, and I made everything, you know, on hand there. It was we spent 10 days together, and I think we got 44 prints in this edition, and it was really, really tough. We all learned a lot in the process, and learned a lot from Dewey. And you can't tell, but there is a split fountain in the center of it, going from like a dark silver to a light silver back to a dark silver. And then we can just go ahead and go on. And then, I mean, I've had this dream of being at Crow Shadow for so long, and when I got the invitation, I was just out of the roof, ecstatic. So I visited Crow Shadow with Wendy Red Star when I was in grad school. I think that was in 2016. And since then I was like, oh, this is something I really, really want to do eventually, because I love printmaking so much. And so kind of just put it out there in the universe. And after all of these different things, like getting these different residencies, I was finally able to work with Judy at Crow Shadow and Maggie as well. And yeah, I had a blast. Had 2 weeks, and we finished, I think, in 13 days. So on our 14th day, we were able to go out and hike and search for Bigfoot things. And yeah, I had a really good time. And again, like when I got there, I didn't really have I think I had a plan. I had like marked out some things in my Adobe Illustrator, but it definitely didn't go as planned. If you can go back to the one of the book art slides, the design that's in the book art slide is about family lineage. And then also at first when I created, it was about making and fitting into boxes within Native art, and like when do you decide to fit in, or when do you break out of them, and what is the definition of either of those two things, because it can be different from one person to the next. But when I finished this book, that design became really just like, it was like my grandma and my great grandma, and then my kid and my mom. And so it became like this way of connecting each generation to the next generation. And so I used it in the print at Crow Shadow. If you can go to that one. And I love split fountains, so I tend to use them a lot. And so these images are of my granny's baskets, and unfortunately we don't have a lot of them, because when she was making baskets, she was selling them to make a living to support her family. And so I recently acquired 2 back. And so the one on top is a flower vase, and my partner got that for me off of eBay, I believe. And then the one on the bottom, I actually traded a piece of art to someone here in our surrounding community who had one, and word of mouth, and got back to me and was like, oh, okay, well, let's trade some art for it. So I made a paper weaving, a screen printed and letterpress printed paper weaving, and traded her for this basket back. And so these 2 prints are just based on my granny's basketry, and trying to honor that tradition that unfortunately didn't get passed down to me. But as I've been home, I've been slowly learning all of that information from 2 mentors in my community who have been master basket makers. And so on the left is Louise Goings, and on the right is Pat Welch. And I'm working a lot with Pat Welch right now, and they've just been tremendous in teaching me about harvesting white oak trees, and then also breaking everything down, processing, and then also searching for our dyes that grow here in the mountains, so that when we can dye the splints when we're ready to weave the baskets together. And this is my mom and my son, and we're peeling a bark off of the walnut tree for a dye.
Thank you, Skye. I bet it covers so many elements of collaboration and this sort of impossibility of making art by oneself. You know, it's always informed by generations and by, I mean, there's literally so many hands. And I think that I think one thing you talked about, I noticed everyone smiled a little bit about, but as all 3 of you happen to be printmakers, and sort of both collaborating with Judy and then probably letting go of a little bit of the control you're used to is probably an interesting process. So can we go to the next slide? So John, I want to turn to you, and maybe you can set us up for this next series of little short videos that are gonna give us a sense of what happens at Crow Shadow. So, and just this notion of collaboration. Whoops, you're muted.
It's definitely about collaboration, but in this video in particular, so I was working with Judy on making transparencies for the lithograph plates. And so in that process, I work really fast. And so I can whip things out fairly quick, and I'm making these transparencies. And fortunately, they had a stone ready to go. And so when it was, as Skye said, and also Marwin, I know as well, when you come from printmaking and you've done this long enough that you know there's certain things and etiquette that you follow, but when you're working with someone who's a collaborative printer and how they function, it's different. It's their shop. So respectfully, you're working with them and you're trying to figure out what to do. And Judy was really good at going, well, let me work on this and let's put you over here and you work on this. And so I had the stone ready to go. They had a stone. And so I worked with Maggie on this beautiful tush wash. I've always wanted to do this tush wash process that gives this beautiful space. And so did a drawing of my grandmother's moccasins, and it's called Generator. And so thinking of generations. So that's the reveal, the big reveal of the litho printing of the stone. And it was exciting to work on the stone too. I think that the notion of the stone has this ability to make us think differently because there's a patience of drawing on it. It's very, to me, almost a space where this is the drawings that I worked from. And so originally I was influenced by my kaku, my Comanche grandmother, and she taught me how to draw as a little kid. And so I would sit with her while she beaded, and she would scatter her beads on the table. And that's what those little dots are. And I would be able to look at that and think about it. And then I would do drawings from the medallion she was beading on. And so the beaded components became a part of my recent work, looking back and thinking about where I learned how to draw. And so I wanted to honor her and think about generations and a generator and how we are some form of generators. And so this print is in reference to her. And so this was the sketch for that. And I think here is a video of, there's two prints we made, Shouting Lightning from Their Eyes, Winter Birds, and then also Summer Birds. And so this is the real, Judy's revealing the final layer of the plate litho. And there it is. We did a split run in the background, and the birds, which are scissortail flycatchers, the state bird of Oklahoma. So I've been using that in my imagery for quite a while. And then there's also these horse mask images and a lot of the Plains tribes and the influence of the horse mask and the celebratory component of it, but also the notion of the horse mask as a form of protection in battle. And so I was thinking about the horse mask and also honoring in a reference the notion of horses to particularly the Kiowa, Comanche, and Cheyenne people and how that function. So I wanted to do a series of drawings about it, which I had, and then I started to do these prints, which Judy was very influential on. You should do these out of the sketchbook. And I'm like, yes, I want to do them. And so there was a nice support moment of that. And also I talked with Judy about the conversations that happen in a print shop is really exciting because you're collaborating, you're having these you're in there in the morning, you're there all day, they're long days of working, but I had these ideas of making these sculptural pieces that would eventually be large scale versions of these prints. And back then I was thinking about it, but now I've made them. So it was also influential for future work. And so that was exciting. And also the colors I was using were bright then, but now they've gotten brighter because of my experience of working with Judy. So I've gotten really more intense with color, and I love what happens in collaboration and what ways of thinking and how that influences us as creators. So this is an installation that was at the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. And it was an exhibition that was curated by Jean Quick-to-See Smith, The Land Carries Our Ancestors. Actually, I'm sitting, behind me is an actual version of the same work when I was preparing for this show, which is now traveling to the New Britain Museum in Connecticut. It's again, you're seeing the influence of the scissortail flycatchers, as well as butterfly images. Emily Arthur, who also is printed at Crow Shadow. The deer image in here is her image too. So she's in this exhibition and some components of it, and the butterfly. And then there's the buffalo from Oklahoma. And then also the field artillery base, Fort Sill, and back to that reference of land and how land affects us. In Oklahoma, Lawton, Fort Sill, there is the military base, which is highly influential on the community, and particularly the tribes there, the Kiowa, Comanche, and Apache. There's helicopters named after them, which you're seeing the Apache helicopter in the corner here. So that reference to the history of the land, but also the descendants, the people who come from that space who were, in prison there, Geronimo of the Apache people, St. Thide of the Kiowa people, Quanah Parker of the Comanche people, the descendants we're here now. We're the people that have come from there. And so on the other end is this beautiful mountain range, which is the Wichita Mountains. And that's where the buffalo and the deer and the other components of nature, and then what's above, on, and below the land, and that notion of landscape and the importance of landscape. And that's what's at the bottom of this piece.
And as I think we're going to go to another image of John, but these images, and that the last one in particular, I was really struck at the National Gallery at this show of how many works from Crow Shadow there were in this show. There were a lot of prints created at Crow Shadow that ended up in this exhibition, but also in part because of your work here, John, and the literal space that it took up, the centrality of printmaking in contemporary Indigenous art practice, I felt was center stage at the National Gallery in the show that was curated by Jean Quick-to-See Smith, and it is really historic in terms of finally bringing contemporary Indigenous art into the National Gallery space. So we're going to go to another image or two of John's, and then I want to hear from Marwin about his experience with a collaboration in printmaking and performance too. So John, you want to speak about this image here? Because I think that relates to what you were talking about how your work at Crow Shadow has influenced some of your other work.
Yeah, this is definitely post Crow Shadow. Being at Crow Shadow, the idea of dancers and movement and flow and the use of the ribbon work and the shield kind of shapes, and also I've gone way more abstract. And I think also thinking in terms of talking to Jim Lavendor too, that was a really beautiful experience of thinking about different ways of looking at the landscape and looking at where we live and where we come from. And so I returned back to Oklahoma not long after that for some visits and for longer term visits for a few months. And so I was able to spend time there. And during that time in Medicine Park, I actually started to create work. I rented a house and was able to turn it into a studio, invited friends in, was there for a while, and made a whole new body of work based on these traveling around to other places. And so it was really wonderful to be able to have that experience. And primarily I use screen printing because it's a really accessible form of printing. It's used in so many components within a community context, in a political context. So it's easy to travel around with it. Where litho's a little different story, but it's definitely part of the process. Yeah, I'll let others speak now.
Yeah. So we could go to the next slide. So Marwin, can you talk for just a couple of minutes about your broader practice and printmaking? Okay,
thank you. With this piece that you see is a collaboration with a contemporary, an Indigenous contemporary dancer. Her name is Maggie Boyette. She is Kiowa and Shawnee. And she as well is from a long lineage of artists. So we have always talked about doing this collaboration and looking at different alternative ways of printing. And so I decided to ask her to see if she was willing to do this collaboration where she would dance over the surface of a woodblock to print the woodblock. And so we talked for about a theme, and we came upon the idea of fragmentation. Is that at some point, you know, like the 39 tribes here in Oklahoma, they have all been displaced to Oklahoma, and we were kind of thinking about the idea of fragmentation, where our cultural information becomes fragmented because how we're taught in our stories and our songs are all in reference to our original origin or our gardens of Eden, right? And so once we get removed from that, and how we have to reconnect and I guess reboot. So I decided to do these performances where I would do these 15-foot wood blocks and work with different dancers. Our first one was with Maggie Boyette, and then we did a second version of that with a dancer from Madison. And then here you see a different block that I cut, and I'm working with a Jicarilla dancer from Santa Fe during the Print Santa Fe festival. And so the image on the right is kind of elements that you would see like around Santa Fe. There's a reference to kind of jewelry, and in Navajo, Santa Fe is called Yotwo, meaning that a reference to turquoise. And so the center of that is where the turquoise would be in a belt buckle or on jewelry. And then there's water on the outside, and then there are flicker feathers that kind of go around that. And then in all of my designs for these wood blocks, there's always a center star, and that star is kind of representative of home, of like the home fires. So and that is the center of I guess who I am, is always going home to New Mexico, and kind of leaving and then coming back, and so that collaboration happened, and so I was able to kind of do these collaborations with the design elements are very site specific, and so I'm getting ready to do one here in Oklahoma in September, and we're going to do it at a festival that they've invited different punk bands, and so I'm going to put the floor down and in the middle of the mosh pit, and let the young kids kind of dance all over them, and it's just also showing like a different form of movement, and a different form of that we as Native people do. I mean, we love all kinds of music, we dance different ways, and it's just kind of highlighting that as well, because movement is a large part of that sacredness, as singing and as speaking our language, and as making. So it's this collaboration has really kind of expanded that, and I love working the larger size as well, and a lot of this is kind of being inspired by working with Judy and Maggie, and because as a collaborator you really have to give up a lot. There's a lot of compromise, and I think that the important part is just listening, and because you get to a point when you're working and you hit a wall, and it's just a little suggestion, and then your mind just kind of picks back up, and you're off to the races again, and I really love that about collaborating, is so this is about that practice. And I usually work with local teens, as you've seen my daughter and a young man. They are the ones who are placing the blocks on the floor right before the performance.
That's awesome. It's amazing. It's a really amazing process, and so exciting to hear about all of these things that you're doing, Marwin and John and Skye as well. So I know we're about at the time for question and answer. If we could go forward in the slide just to see the group shot. Yeah, I think that's an image we'll rest on, and I will turn it back over to Jen for Jen and Robin for monitoring the questions. But this is a image from Skye that was at a printmaking gathering, a print with. You want to tell us who's in the image quickly, Skye, and then we'll turn to the Q&A.
Yeah, this is from the SGC conference in, John, is it 2017?
Yeah, I think it's 2017 or 16, 17, I think. Yeah, it's in Nevada, Las Vegas.
But yeah, Jean Quick to See Smith was the recipient of the, what, I'm not certain what it's actually called.
It's the main I guess the honorary award winner for the conference. I can't remember the name either. For SGC.
Yeah. I think the importance of this image is like the community of Indigenous printmakers and coming together to honor Jean and the relationships amongst one another. And so I think that's part of what Crow Shadow does too, is link people and their relationships and their careers. And so maybe where we can go now is to any questions. Or Jen, I'm going to ask you to, and Robin, to point us in that direction.
Yeah, of course. We have maybe a quick one from Sheila in the chat, just asking Marwin about that last work that we were looking at, the woodcut. Sheila asks if it's printed on paper, fabric, just kind of what the substrate is there.
They're printed on paper, and this one, as you see, they're all tiled together to make this 15-foot print. I haven't ventured off into fabric just yet. Just the and talking with Joe Feddersen, who was another resident there, and who was one of the people who met. We were talking about the portability of these larger prints, and he was like, "Why don't you just tile them together? That way you can store them." He was like, when you work this large, you have to think about storage and how much space that they pick up. And so he was like, why don't you tile them so that you can hang them up and you can store them in just a little box and all of that. So and that's how these kind of came to be. It was just kind of relying on that, on the experienced printmakers.
They're amazing. And Mary in the chat loves this, and so do we. This is very, very cool. There's a question in the Q&A that I think is a really good one to end on, but maybe before that, I want to get one in, and something that all three of you have me thinking about here. I have several questions, but in the interest of time, one is, you all are using printmaking sometimes in this very traditional way, and then other times in ways that really resonate across these different ways of working, different practices, getting these collaborations with these performers, Marwin or John thinking about this kind of installation space, or Skye thinking about the relationship between the paper and the print and the basket weaving. I'm just curious, for anybody who wants to take it, or all three of you, how do you think about the relationship of print within your practice and kind of vis-a-vis these other ways of working?
I use print as a way to harvest. So I always kind of put it back to the basket making process of going out to pick certain woods or materials or dyes. You have to be in a specific landscape for that, depending on what you're making. So when I go to print shops, if I'm at a letterpress print shop, or for instance at Crow Shadow, Maggie and Judy gave me some offcut paper to work with so that I could use the litho ink and make these split fountain rolls, print them, and then so when I get home, I get to use that as a material to make my other compositions in my paper weavings. So I also do that when I go to letterpress print shops too, with ornamental type, because each print shop has their own specific ornamental type. So I'm able to kind of pick and choose what I really appreciate, and then use that material and take it home like I would with basketry materials.
Anybody else?
Well, I think I'm always interested in kind of pushing the boundary. Like when you approach printmaking, like, you know the rules, right? You can go to school for them and kind of learn the rules, but after a while, you have to try to figure out like how to expand it and how to break the rules and really, you know, stay within that. And I think what attracts me to printmaking is that how community based is it the process is. Right now I've taken this little break, but I'm using a letterpress, and I have set up a booth at the language conference. And it's happening downstairs right now. And I brought all the types in there with me, and I'm teaching Indian kids from all over Oklahoma how to use the letterpress and to make posters and to make, to really have them focus on their voice and having them focus on language as well. And so, you have that versatility, and that's what I really love about printmaking. It has a really broad versatility. You can make it into 3D, you can make it as large as you want, you go as small as you want, but it's like you still keep to that original intent of making art for the masses, and it's fast. It could be fast, it could be slow. It's, you just are attracted to that speed, and so, but you're still talking to the masses, and I think that printmaking really, for me, the way I see it, it offers a conversation. There's a conversation, and paper kind of makes that happen. There's a lot more of that conversation as opposed to like canvas or working in sculpture, or other materials. But I think paper for me is the thing that is the medium that really starts that conversation.
I also think, I mean, with paper also has a multiple way of working too. And so you can work it in it can be sculptural, it can be a book piece, it could be it doesn't have to be flat, it can be arranged. The other thing, what I agree with Marwin, which is really important, is about printmaking is about community, and being Indigenous is about community. And so if you look at the history of colonization from a lens of what has happened and how things are changing and what's happening and what's going to happen, and now we're shifting to a new lens that's reflecting a new voice from Indigenous perspectives. And so this is what artists have been doing the whole time, but now I think the reality, and particularly Indigenous artists, are starting to be able to get into these spaces. And I think Crow Shadow is facilitating that, supporting and advancing that lens. So it's becoming a broader lens to look at what's been going on the whole time. And I think Indigenous people have been using printmaking and their cultural perspectives for years. And I think this is a time now where we're here and the voices are being heard.
Thank you so much, John. And there's one quick question here. Maybe we'll just have each person give us a quick little glimpse into the future. The question is from Alex, who says, I appreciate your foregrounding your work in relationship to the land, species, and the knowledge of elders. Are there any projects you're excited about for the future? Does anyone just want to share something exciting coming up before we close? Nobody has anything exciting coming up? Skye, I saw you.
I have a few things. I have a solo show in Santa Fe in August at Echo Gallery. I'm working on a really intense community-based project here in Cherokee for our new senior care center, which will go into the community room, and it's basically talking about old ways of medicines and plant medicines. And so a lot of it delves into going to interview our elders and see what types of plants maybe we have forgotten about or don't use as much as we once did. And so it's been very challenging, but that should be finished by the summertime.
Very exciting. Anybody else? John?
Well, Marwin and I both have an exhibition we're in, The Land Carriers Our Ancestors, which opens next 2 weeks from now at the New Britain Museum in Connecticut. And I'm actually going to Sherry Leedy Gallery, flying there tomorrow in Kansas City for an art opening for Emily Arthur, as well as I, that's happening there. And Tom Jones, who's another incredible Indigenous artist, Ho-Chunk artist. And also the show that opens at New Britain Museum, which both Marwin and I are in, coming up, and that's in 2 weeks. And I got a Hamilton Woodtype Press. I'm doing a project with them with text and image that's happening at some point in the next month or two.
Cool. Cool.
Marwin.
I am currently working on not developing, but making some wood types lettering for the letterpress, and I'm working with the Cherokee Nation, and then also the Osage Nation, because they both have their own syllabaries, and so and in order for me to do more of these and working with youth and really trying to preserve native languages. And in April, I am going to go to Italy to support our friend who at the Venice Biennale. And then other than that, it's just trying to make work and trying to Jeffrey Gibson is the artist, and I'm going there just to be his cheerleader and of some sort, and I'm looking forward to that, and looking forward to seeing what's out there as well. And then also our friends from New Zealand, I've just figured out that like some of our friends that I've met from going down to New Zealand who are going to be artists as well. So there's, again, kind of coming back to the idea of connecting dots. And I think printmaking is really a lot about that. Is like there are these dots that are out there, and how do we reconnect with those dots or make new ones, and then other than that, just try to make work and try to support and promote the younger artist, which is really important, because that, through Jean has done that for us as well, and just trying to keep that lineage going.
Absolutely.
For the local artist.
Absolutely. And this title, Connecting the Dots, came from this quote of Marie's, but really I think is kind of conceptually such a perfect anchor where we started, where we're coming back to here at the end. Rebecca, before I close, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I just want to say thank you to all of the artists and to Judy for her dedication to Crow Shadow, and for facilitating this work of these 3 artists and of so many, and also just like homage to Jim Labrador in particular, and his vision and the vision of so many other people, and to the land there at Crow Shadow and everyone's homelands. So thank you so much for inviting us all.
Thank you all for being here. This was really, really interesting. I learned so much. I hope folks at home also learned more about Crow Shadow. Please follow them. There's some links here. Pay attention to who they're working with. They're doing amazing work. Thank you, Judith, for being here to represent that. And thank you, Marwin, John, and Skye, for teaching us a little bit more about your practice. This was really, really wonderful to hear, and Rebecca for organizing. Once again, you can see Storywork, The Prince of Marie Watt, through May 18 at Print Center, New York. We have a lot of exhibition programming happening in the space, including a tour this Saturday, and of course our ongoing community printing circle. So if you're here in New York, you can join those. For more information on our programs, get on our mailing list, check our website, or follow us on Instagram at Print Center New York. Thank you once again, everybody. And behind the scenes, we couldn't have done this without Robin Siddle, who's coordinated the talk and who was running the tech for us today. So thank you very much, Robin. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Have a great rest of the day, and we will see you all very soon. Please enjoy this clip as we leave. This is John Jammin in the studio.
Yes, I think.
I think so too. I don't hear it, but
Yeah, but
but there it is
there it is.
to close us out. Thanks everybody for being here. Bye, everybody.
Bye.